please.
Ben Spencer.
Speaker, so normally, if you're going to deploy expectation management, it's usually because you've got something that isn't so great, and you sort of set the scene that things are going to be really bad. So when the day arrives, people go, oh, wow, actually, it wasn't, it's actually quite a good thing. This thing that isn't so good, it's actually quite a good thing. But what we've seen in expectation management around this budget is 6 months of doom and gloom and terror. My constituents, everyone I know, dreading what is going to come out on the 26th of November. But worse than that, we've seen crashing business confidence. We've seen taxes of all different shapes and forms floated. I'm surprised that we haven't seen a tax on taxes itself been floated by the Chancellor or the Department in the recent months of budget. We've seen U-turn on the budget before it's been announced, and then we've seen an announcement on the budget half an hour before the budget was even delivered. Go on.
The honourable gentleman for giving way, but would he not agree that it wasn't a U-turn? It was that there were actually better economic statistics that meant that the hole that the Chancellor was trying to fill was smaller, and actually that's something people on both sides of the House should be welcoming, that the economic numbers were better. I find it quite bizarre that anyone would attack the Chancellor for actually finding herself in a better situation. All of us, our economy would be worse, and our constituents would be worse off if we'd been having to look down the barrel of any change to the headline rates of income tax, quite aside from the manifesto pledges that we had made.
I thank the honourable member for his intervention and suggest he looks at the OBR report, which, as I mentioned, was released half an hour before the Chancellor stood up, which goes into detail about why that statement is entirely false. Look, in Surrey, we are one of the biggest contributors to taxation revenue, and it's my constituents who are going to be particularly hit by these budget measures, if not targeted by these measures. And I hear their frustrations all the time about the amount of money that we contribute, but yet the lack of reciprocity when it comes to investment in Surrey so that we can continue to be an economic powerhouse. And my constituents, they worry about the future, but particularly they worry about what this means in terms of opportunities for their kids and the debt that we are laying on them because of decisions being made today. Sadly, this budget and the one before it shows that Labour is totally unable to rein in spending. We have yet another budget of higher welfare paid by tax. Now look, there's been a lot of focus in this debate on poverty and childhood poverty, and I think that's absolutely right. It's a really important subject to tackle. It is important that we help all families and everyone out of poverty in the best way going forwards. But you work towards resolving child poverty by ensuring people have jobs, by focusing on the tax. Go for it.
Member for giving way. So he agrees with us on the points in this budget of investing £16 million into a cutting-edge STEM centre in my constituency to enable us to repair the post-Conservative scarring that we've felt as a community as we've seen the hollowing out of our manufacturing sector.
She'll have to forgive me, I don't know the details in terms of the specifics in terms of her constituency, but what I can say in terms of broader macroeconomic details is that the reduction in employment as a consequence of national insurance contributions mean that there's more children who have parents who do not have jobs. I can see she would like to intervene.
I wonder if he would address the point that 6 in 10 of the children in families affected by the two-child benefit limit are in families who have jobs. I wonder if he would address himself to the situation of my constituent who lost her husband. She was working, he was working, they had 3 kids together. They were working and still they were affected by the two-child benefit limit. It is facile in the extreme to talk about getting jobs as just the route out of poverty. It is not just the route out of poverty.
Well, I'm so pleased the honourable member raised the point about people who are in work but still poor, which is a point I was going to come on to in terms of tackling child poverty. So if you just wait a second, I can respond to her questions in full. I just want to focus on this sort of more macro cost point to begin for the moment. Food inflation has gone up to 4.9%. That is, for people, especially people who are poorer, food costs are a big chunk of their daily spending. That is a direct result of decisions to raise national employment contributions. Turns out, taxes on businesses get passed on to working people. Energy costs, and we're still, who knew indeed? Energy costs, which we're still waiting to come down, are a big chunk of everybody's outgoings. And property costs also are a big chunk of people's outgoings, reducing and putting more pressure on the private rental sector, particularly landlords. The measures in the budget today in terms of increased taxation, in terms of property revenue, is only going to be passed on to the consumer vis-à-vis people who are renting, and yet another cost pressure. I wish the benches opposite would think through not just step 1 of a budget intervention, but what happens in step 2, 3 and 4 in terms of impact on their constituents. The other way you deal with child poverty is to look at cliff edges. Look at cliff edges at all ends of the taxation system, whether that's the wrapping down of fee when you work for 28 hours, in terms of the in-work poverty costs. When we looked at this on the Work and Pensions Committee, and the Minister opposite was the chair at the time, one of the things that really came out through and through was lots of the families in difficulty were single-parent families, and they struggled to go above 28 hours because of the issue with childcare costs and the marginal benefit. We need to look at cliff edges in terms of people, also spectrums, in terms of things like housing allowance being wrapping down, in terms of things like council tax being wrapping down. We need to get rid of cliff edges so that work always does truly pay. And the third one, which I think is also really important in terms of helping child poverty, is making sure the child maintenance system works. There are plenty of families who have a parent who is not supporting their child who should be. That is absolutely scandalous, and that needs to be fixed.
Heartedly that there's child maintenance system reforming. Does he agree with me that in 2010, when the Conservative and Lib Dem coalition brought in a £50 entrance fee for people who were trying to get the money that their absent parent of their child was refusing to pay, to access that system, the £50 entrance fee was wrong? Was that a bad decision by his government at the time?
So I'd invite her to look at the reports that were released as Parliament in terms of looking at reform in terms of child maintenance, and particularly the barriers that were set up in the system, both in terms of direct payments and the indirect payment system. I think all of us would agree across the House the child maintenance system absolutely needs reform. The issue with the two-child benefit, though, is most parents, if not I think all parents, would like to love their children and would like to have more children should money, time, things like, I stand corrected, but people make decisions in terms of when planning their families, in terms of the resources they have, whether that's personal resources, whether that's the time, whether that's the money to go forwards. It is fundamentally unfair to say to one group of people who are making difficult budgetary decisions or otherwise in terms of having more children, you're going to be more taxed so you can pay for other people who are not subject to those difficult budgetary decisions because they're not employed at the moment. It's fundamentally not. It's fundamentally not fair. Look, I'm sorry. It's not fair because other colleagues won't get in. This budget is unfair. Fairness is about honouring promises made and delivering on government's responsibility to govern for all. Fairness is about making sure opportunities are available to everyone, not just those who work hard, so that those who work hard to grasp them aren't penalised for their efforts. Taxes should be used to improve security, services, growth and prosperity, not to garner political support. And finally, fairness is not mortgaging away our children's future on an ever-spiralling amount of debt.